Hello and welcome back to Born to Rant. I'm Brandon, and this week we are diving into one of the biggest franchises of the 1990s, the movie that introduced all of us to sky surfing, and the movie that gave us one of the most underrated villains of all time.
The Ooze is back!
That's right, today we are diving deep into the world of 1995's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, directed by Bryan Spicer and starring Karan Ashley, Johnny Yong Bosch, Steve Cardenas, Jason David Frank, Amy Jo Johnson, David Yost, and Paul Freeman. We'll dive into the movie's TV origins, the grueling production process, everything that makes this movie still worth watching, and its legacy over 30 years later. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, but Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was probably the first property that I was really obsessed with in real time. It premiered when I was like 3, so I do barely remember it, but I was absolutely obsessed. Actually, coming home from preschool to watch the season 2 premiere where Lord Zed first arrives is a core childhood memory for me, probably because it was the first time I ever understood appointment TV. And by the time this movie was about to come out, the Power Rangers were fully inescapable, not only because their show was huge, but because they were constantly running ads for the movie, the toys, the video games, the Happy Meals, the costumes, you name it, it had a commercial. But I do remember my cousin getting this movie on VHS and we would constantly be watching it. Like at a certain point we stopped watching the show and just started watching the movie over and over again. And sure, watching this movie as an adult, there are a lot of things that don't work about it, but it's still a really fun movie, from the opening with the skydiving and Tommy sky surfing, to the reveal of my boy Ivan Ooze, the adventures on Phaedos, and of course the sick ninja outfits the Rangers get towards the end of the movie. Plus Bulk and Skull are there and they always made me giggle. That's a lot of air! But before I start getting too deep into everything that makes this movie still worth watching, let's take a step back and learn a little bit more about how the movie came to be.
We're doing our thing that we do, we're high school kids, and then we're part-time superheroes.
Now, I'm not going to get into the full history of Power Rangers in this video. There are plenty of other videos on YouTube talking about the Super Sentai series and how the TV show we all grew up with intermixed elements from the original Japanese show with newly shot footage in English. Instead, I want to jump straight into season 2 of Power Rangers and how we ended up losing half of our original cast. And I mean, what it really boils down to, and this is no surprise, is corporate greed and corporations knowing that they can get away with underpaying young stars on a hit show. And midway through season 2, Austin St. John, who played Jason, Walter Jones, who played Zach, and Thuy Trang, who played Trini, decided they were going to protest the low pay and poor working conditions, which unfortunately quickly led to Saban just firing the 3 actors and instead scrambling to recast them. And according to this direct quote from stunt coordinator Jeff Pruitt, the main Power Rangers were making, quote, less for an entire week of shooting than a bit actor would make in a single day on any other TV show, which is just absurd, especially when Saban is claiming to have made $1 billion off the franchise in the first year of running episodes. And in November of 1994, St. John's, Jones, and Trang would star in their final episodes of Power Rangers, which also introduced their replacements, Steve Cardenas as Rocky, Karan Ashley as Aisha, and Johnny Yong Bosch as Adam. And all 3 of the new actors would start just a few days after being hired. Their parents even all had to send their clothes to them via FedEx because they had to be in LA to start filming immediately. And then they all found out that 6 weeks after starting on the show, they'd be flying to Australia to film the movie. As for the movie itself, Fox and Saban decided about halfway through filming season 2 that they wanted a movie, and instead of having people come in and pitch and hiring just one writer, they instead decided to hire 3 writers to each write their own script, and then they'd pick the one they liked best and move forward with it. And once they had all 3 scripts, they decided that they really didn't like any of them, but writer John Camps had come the closest to capturing the tone that they'd been envisioning for the movie. But then, after a few more drafts with Camps, they weren't really liking what he was turning in, which is when they brought back in Arn Olson to take over. It sounds like Camps was responsible for the idea of taking the Rangers out of Angel Grove and to another planet, and he also came up with the first iteration of Ivan Ooze, and then Olson was brought in to basically turn those ideas into something a bit more cohesive, which is why he was given credit as screenwriter and Camps was only given a story by credit. This is also right around the same time where director Bryan Spicer Spicer comes aboard the project, taking over for Steve Wang, who left the project citing the dreadful creative differences. And in October of 1994, with the script, director, cast, and budget of $15 million in place, the production traveled to Australia to begin filming, and filming was originally supposed to last just 3 months. However, production would not officially wrap until the end of February of 1995. And there were a lot of things that led to the filming delays. A big part of it was that the team shot a huge chunk of the movie, the studio reviewed it, didn't like it, and had them shoot it all again. There was also an issue with Gabrielle Fitzpatrick, who plays Dulcia. She developed an ovarian cyst early into filming and had to leave production, and she was replaced by Olivia Benson herself, Mariska Hargitay. And I know what you might be thinking, I don't remember the need for the Special Victims Unit in this movie. Well, that's because shooting for this movie took so long that by the time Fitzpatrick had recovered from her cyst, the studio had decided that they didn't really like Hargitay's performance. They felt that she was just too serious and stoic, and since they were going to be reshooting a ton of the movie anyway, they just decided to bring back Fitzpatrick and fire Hargitay. But also don't feel too bad for her, because SVU does start just a couple of years after this, and that job has kept her employed for decades at this point. Anyway, there were actually so many delays in filming that Fox and Saban decided that with the downtime, they'd write and shoot 2 3-part episodes for the show. And those would be The Wedding and The Return of the Green Ranger, which would both premiere as part of season 2. Filming for the movie would end in February of 1995, and then the movie would go into post-production, which required a lot more visual effects work than the show typically did. And well, more on the effects of this movie in just a bit. And on June 30th, 1995, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie, was released into theaters, and on its opening weekend, it would only place 4th at the box office behind the opening weekend of Apollo 13 and the 2nd and 3rd weekends of Pocahontas and Batman Forever, respectively. However, even though this movie placed 4th, it ended up making $13.1 million against its $15 million budget, and it would go on to make a worldwide total of $66.4 million, making the movie a big hit for the studio. And even box office numbers aside, you know the merchandising for this movie made it profitable alone. Apologies for the interruption, but I wanted to just jump in and ask that if you're enjoying the video so far, that you take a second to like or subscribe. Born to Rant is a completely independent channel, and if it means anything to you at all, I use absolutely zero AI in the making of my videos. Now, with all of that out of the way, let's grab our power coins and dive into everything that makes this movie still worth your time.
But frankly, I'm sick of your ugly faces and your dull personalities. Yeah.
And if we're talking about what makes this movie still worth watching, I think a lot of it boils down to how nostalgic you are for the movie, because this was made first and foremost for small children, so it shouldn't be surprising that it has some problems, primarily the Rangers themselves. But before I get into that, I first want to take a second to look at some of the actual filmmaking on display here. And I think we start with the surprisingly rich cinematography by Paul Murphy, and this is actually the only thing he shot that I've seen, and it was also one of the last things he ever shot as a DP. I'm not really sure what he's up to these days, but it seems like he's completely left the industry, which is a shame because this movie's got some really nice looking shots throughout. Obviously, the beauty of the Australian landscapes is doing a lot of the heavy lifting, but also this shot of a dying Zordon is something that stuck with me since I first saw the trailer for this movie. It just really conveys this deep sadness to me, plus Craig Stern's production design absolutely kicks ass here. I'm also a big fan of the score by Graham Revell. Plus, it also has some great needle drops throughout the movie. And I'll say this, I am a notorious Red Hot Chili Peppers disliker, but their cover of Stevie Wonder's Higher Ground that opens this movie does kinda slap.
Catch you on the flip side.
But obviously, the biggest star from a filmmaking perspective is the choreography. I mean, realistically, that's what this movie is about. Teenagers doing sick karate choreography while fighting off silly creatures. And just a quick side note, when the Tengu Warriors were on screen, I could not stop thinking about the big horny bird from the opening of Little Nicky. In all seriousness though, this movie has some genuinely fun choreography throughout. One of my favorite moments is Billy and Kimberly doing back handsprings for no real reason, but there's one thing that I think think really works in this movie, one thing that makes the whole thing worth watching, and that is Paul Freeman's performance as Ivan Ooze. It almost feels like he's in a completely different movie. I mean, he's literally the only character in the entire history of the franchise to even say the word kill.
You can kill him.
And just in case you didn't know, because I sure as hell didn't know before doing research for this video, but Paul Freeman, who plays Ooze, also happens to have played another one of my favorite villains in film history, Belloc from Raiders of the Lost Ark. But he is completely unrecognizable here. And shout out to Warren Beaton, who designed the look of Ooze, because I think this just still looks so cool today. And I mean, Freeman is just chewing every single bit of scenery every single time he's on screen. He has like all of the best lines in the movie.
A teenager with a big mouth. Not much has changed in 6,000 years.
And apparently a good chunk of it was ad-libbed, like this line about the Brady Bunch.
All the things that I have missed! The Black Plague, the Spanish Inquisition, the Brady Bunch reunion.
But I think Ooze is a genuinely scary and fun villain. He does what a new villain should do. He shows up, shakes up the status quo, and puts our heroes on the run. And okay, I think it's now time to talk about the overall story and the Power Rangers themselves. And I just want to be completely honest. I think the Rangers are the worst part of the movie.
Move this man!
I know. I'm sorry. And hear me out. I don't actually think it's any of the actors or even the script's fault. It honestly is just the nature of doing such a kid-focused and kid-friendly title like Power Rangers. There's just not a lot of room for the characters to get any emotional depth or for any of them to have much of an arc. I guess as a team you could argue they have an arc, but really this is more of a quest movie. And after Ooze enters the picture, he really does set up the entire movie. First he goes to the Rangers' hideout and takes out Zordon. Then Zordon and Alpha 5 send the Rangers to the distant planet of Phaedos to seek and obtain the Great Power, which will both revive Zordon and give the Rangers their morphine powers back. And this first sequence on Phaedos next to the water just looks so incredible. And the Rangers getting their ninja costumes is legitimately burned into my brain forever. It just feels so iconic. And is what makes this movie part of the Mount Rushmore of 90s kid ninja movies. But also we get my favorite line in the movie here.
Adam, what's wrong?
I'm a frog.
Apparently Bosch insisted on saying this because he thought it was super lame that he had to be the frog, which is just very funny to me. But if I'm being completely honest, I think this movie's momentum just kind of falls off a cliff once the Rangers are back in Angel Grove and call in their Zords and for the Megazord. At this point, it sort of just turns into a CGI mess, and not even good CGI. We're talking early 90s PS1 level CGI for the final battle. And it's not the movie's fault that the CGI at the time was not up to snuff. And yes, I also remember that every episode always ended with a Megazord fight, so it would have been weird to not include it here, but like I said, I feel like it really just makes the momentum drop off a cliff. But the movie ends with the Megazord heading into space to defeat Ooze, the Rangers saving Zordon, and the Rangers getting a sick fireworks show in their honor. So, over 30 years later, what is the legacy of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, the movie? I think it mostly exists as a time capsule and a look into what the early 90s were all about, at least as far as kids' movies go. And like I've said multiple times, this movie was clearly made for kids, and it doesn't really try to be anything other than a kids' movie. The Rangers specifically are all giving very stiff but standard performances, and I don't know, I do think it would have been cool if we could have gotten some more depth to the characters in this movie, but realistically, that's just not what the goal of this movie was. The goal was to sell toys. I think the biggest legacy this movie has is Ivan Ooze specifically. I mean, when X-Men Apocalypse came out 10 years ago, the entire world stopped and collectively said, okay, but why does Apocalypse look like Ivan Ooze? And it's honestly really impressive that this character has had such a staying power with people over the decades. I would also be remiss if I didn't mention that we sadly lost Jason David Frank a couple of years ago, and he was someone that really dedicated his entire life to this franchise, and he was always an advocate for keeping it a kids show. Even in 2015, when Joseph Kahn released his excellent dark and gritty Power Rangers parody short film, Frank was very firm that while he enjoyed it, he felt that Power Rangers should never be anything above a PG-13 rating. And there would be a couple more Power Rangers movies released theatrically after this, including Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, and a reboot in 2017 that I thought was totally okay, but neither of these made much of a splash at the box office. Obviously, the show has continued in various forms, forums over the years, and I haven't revisited those early episodes in decades, but I am mildly curious. So if you want to see me do a retrospective on the first couple seasons of Power Rangers, please be very loud about it in the comments below. Also, what do you think about this movie? Does it hold a special place in your heart? What about the rest of the Power Rangers franchise? If you've made it this far into the video, thank you for watching, and as always, an extra special thank you to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members here on YouTube. You all really help me keep the lights on here at Born to Rant, and I could not do it without you. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. It really helps smaller independent channels like myself out, and that's going to do it for Born to Rant this week, okay? Thank you. Bye-bye.